And here we are. This is iBookBindings live stream. Today we have Sophie Schneideman as our guest, a rare book dealer, and we are going to talk about a bunch of amazing book bindings today. Hi, Sophie. Nice to have you here.
Hi, thank you for having me, both of you.
I'm Stepan Chizhov. My co-host, as usual, is Pavel Voronin. Well, not as usual. Last time you skipped our talk.
Yeah.
And on the rare occasion where we had a Russian guest.
Yeah.
Yes.
So anyway, we're happy to see any of our viewers, any of your comments. As usual, if you have any questions, please post them in the chat, both on Facebook and on YouTube. We'll be reading both of the streams. So don't hesitate to ask your questions and we'll pass them to Sophie. Once again, as usual, please check the links in the description. There are links to Sophie's Instagram website, and I think I even included your profile on iBooks, just because
none of these books are there, so
yeah. Well, anyway,
they don't put that much up there, but yeah, you never know.
And of course, as usual, we invite everyone to share with us from where they are joining us, from which country, from which city, town, locality. It's always interesting to know from where people are watching these live streams. So hi everyone, and yeah, let's dive in. Sophie, you are a rare book dealer. How did that happen?
Yeah. How did that happen? In 1990, I left university. I was at St Andrews up in Scotland, and it was a recession. It always seems to be a recession. There were no jobs, and I kind of vaguely thought I always liked books, but I didn't really think there was a job in the book world. And so I vaguely thought, books maybe. Went to Sotheby's to see if they had a job, but your father had to have a major art collection for Sotheby's to consider employing you in those days.
Okay.
And they didn't pay a living wage, so that was a no. But about a week after I left
your
university,
father needed not only to have a large collection of books, but also
he did not have,
but also have,
he did have a
lot
large
of
collection
money,
of books,
to
but
support
they
their
were
child.
military history mainly, so they weren't really. But I went to a christening about a week after I left university, and met this old guy who was slightly mad but very sweet, and talked at me. And then at the end of it was on a Sunday. He said, "Well, come and see me tomorrow." And tomorrow was I went to 50 Berkeley Square, which is where Mags Brothers was located then, and I started working there. But being a girl in those days, I was there to answer the telephone.
Okay.
So it's been a long journey. So so I was there for quite a long time. Eventually, I started selling books thanks to a lovely man called John Collins, who was a bit of a maverick and liked to upset the apple cart, a disruptor, you'd call him now. And so he trained me on the quiet, and then 17 years later, I left and started my own business in 2007, and focusing on the art of the book. So that's the story in a nutshell.
Yeah. I
And,
think sorry Pavel, I interrupt you as well. So I think it was Katie Abbott we discussed with her experience of being a bookbinder in 1980s in a bindery where there were only men, and initially women were only allowed to sew books or something like that. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I think the world's moved on. I don't think we recognize how thrilling that is, actually. And everyone's very angry all the time, but actually when you think about how bad it really was, things have moved on so much now. And to be honest, apart from a little bit there at that time, I found the whole world of books very open and very free, and nobody's ever not bought something from me or whatever because I'm a woman. And in fact, I think it's been a benefit. I think women listen better than men, and I think collectors might like that sometimes, maybe. So it's been a long journey, but I think the difference between now and 1990 is without we didn't even have computers. If I wanted to quote someone a book or do anything, you had to type up a letter and send it. So it has changed quite a lot. We didn't have a database. We just had card index, and it certainly has. Things move much faster now. You have to work harder. That's the downside. You can't go out for long lunches because you miss things. But look at us now. If I thought that this was a possibility ever, all your learning had to be out of books. You couldn't just switch on YouTube and watch two people who know a lot about bookbinding talk to people about it. It's an incredible thing, really. We're really lucky. And positive things about the internet.
Yeah. Let's focus on positive things, at least for now.
Yeah.
Pasha, you wanted to say something when I interrupted you.
I wanted to ask you when your interest in binding specifically, books as art objects began.
Yeah.
Because from what I understand, it has never been a big market. So
No.
I can only assume you didn't start selling fine bindings, let alone designer book binding.
Yeah, no. But I was always interested. No, I suppose my interest started really with typography, because I started selling bibliography, and that included type specimens but they were always okay when you sold bibliography, which you can't imagine really being a market now, but it was a massive market because every person interested in books had to buy the bibliographies, and there's no other way of getting your information. You couldn't look things up on Google. You actually had to go and look at the books. So running that department was actually massive at that time. And I mean, not financially probably, but you had to be on top of what was coming in, what was being written, and then you just started looking at book bindings there. But also I was at Mags at a time when they were building Getty's library. And so there was a lot of stuff coming in, and Brian Maggs was running that, and he was a great binder himself. And so there was always a sort of bit of designer bookbinders going on. There was a case in Maggs which never changed. No one ever came and moved it all around, but that was right by me where I was sitting answering the telephone. So I think it was it's sort of osmosis. It all sort of went in, and then of course as I started to deal in private press books, which are often beautifully bound, Dove's Press, Dove's Bindery, etc. Then it just evolved like that. And it's not a big market, but there are always people collecting it, and and I hope that I've helped that happen too, by showing this stuff all over the place and being quite discriminating about what and who I show. I'm quite fussy about it. Not just any old bookbinder. It has to appeal to me, because otherwise it's just a list of things that you don't care about. You can't sell anything you don't care about. You always try to sell with your head, but it doesn't work. You have to sell with your heart.
Well,
everything that you think should sell.
Some people probably can sell anything or everything or whatever, but yeah, it's definitely more enjoyable to talk to people who enjoy stuff they're working with and selling. But I wanted.
You don't believe in it.
I wanted to say this before we started our stream, but I forgot because I was doing tech stuff. But we had booksellers a couple of times on our live streams and podcasts, and it's always like entering the Aladdin's cave with lots of stuff around them, and
yes.
I think we tried to invite Ian Khan once again to our talk for him to show us what treasures he has at his place, and still we haven't succeeded. Maybe in the future, but we had this one talk with him during one of the antique book fairs, which was fun because he was surrounded by rare books.
His stands are he's a volume guy. I think that's the best way of describing it. His stands are bewildering in their depth. Yes,
but it's definitely a great experience to talk to a person who enjoys this stuff. So that's for us.
Well, I can't do it, so I have to sell it. I mean, I'm always in awe of people who can actually do it, and I think that's the kind of respect that you need to understand how really hard it is. You're not just going to go and bookbind tomorrow. And well, we can't all be Cobden Sanderson. He took a year and maximum, and he was already producing some of the world's most beautiful bindings, and goodness knows how he did it, but he did. And it still amazes me, having watched you guys, and other people like you at work. You think, how did this man just go from 0 to 60 like that? It's incredible. But
And when did you become aware of the modern living masters of bookbinding?
I suppose that was really being with Brian Maggs. That was, obviously he was a great bookbinder himself, and was heavily involved with the bookbinders. So I think that early on I was aware of them, and then when in the 2000s I went to work in Portobello Road. My husband and I shared a sort of atelier, would be a very grand word, shop, and he does photography and shows photographers and things. So it was quite symbiotic. But I helped the designer bookbinders by having a few shows in there, which was sort of mad as well as amazing. It was quite a lot to deal with sometimes, and I think but I was always aware of what was going on, and they always stayed in contact, and then I always had their magazine. I was a member and had their magazine, so you could see what was kind of things were going on. But I don't know, I've been a judge on some competitions and things, but I don't know enough about, and I would love it if someone would like to tell me all about it. Maybe you two one day, about bookbinders beyond Britain and America, and obviously I know some of the French ones, but the rest of the world's quite opaque. It's quite hard to find them. They don't have things like DB, which make it very easy, and so the DB international competition catalogues are really helpful, as is the Society of Bookbinders. They kind of show you what's going on, but those names are not appearing often enough in your life to know who just produced one great binding. They might be a student, you don't know anything about them, so that there is a need for that, I think, because we're in a global world now, and there'll be really interesting things going on in Germany and Hungary and Romania and who knows where, that we don't know anything about, really. I mean, you're helping with that. But,
we have a dream of sort of bridging to South America, because there is a huge bookbinding community over there.
Well,
and
Seoul obviously does a lot.
But not only. There are lots.
Yeah, well, exactly. There's sort of one representative, because she travels.
Yeah, exactly. And then there is a language barrier, but there are beautiful bookbinders in Chile, in Argentina, in Brazil, all over South America. In Mexico there are also beautiful. Well, that's already North America, but still, a Spanish-speaking part of the world. Also, we wanted to have more people from Asia as well, but once again, oftentimes language barrier is a huge problem to reach out there. Yeah. So, but gradually we're getting there.
I was out in China at the beginning of the year and doing a lecture tour, and actually talking about the history of bookbinding in England specifically, because it was an hour. How long are you going to? And met some people who are binding there, and some of them are fantastic. I mean, really amazing, and sort of have that thing that they shared these particular ones with the Japanese, of that really, precise, beautiful technique that, once they embraced the Western Codex, which of course is the big leap for them, that having that incredible mastery of onlay and inlay and tooling and whatever. It was amazing, and we don't know any of them really. You're right. Hooray. Hooray that you're doing that. But more international competitions possibly.
Yes, hopefully. Maybe something from iBookBinding in the future. We'll see.
Maybe actually a sort of open call kind of thing. It's hard to do it without seeing it, but I think it's definitely something.
So should we switch to the main topic of our talk today?
I'll tell you about a few of the books.
Yeah.
So it's at the printer right now. I'm about to publish a catalogue
Yeah.
about women makers. It's more general than just bookbinders, but there's a lot of bookbinders in that. And it's called On the Distaff Side, which is a sort of expression in England. You know, the distaff was the spinning tool. And it's an expression that was used for women makers, I suppose. And so some of these are women bookbinders, and so I thought it would be quite fun to show some of these. I specialize in sort of really from the end of the 19th century to the present day, so we're not going to go much further back than that, but it's probably quite hard to find a lot of bookbinders earlier than that. They certainly were around. So I just thought I'd show you some of the material that will be in there, and if anyone can chip in. Obviously my knowledge is not comprehensive, but if anyone wants to tell me things I don't know, I'd be grateful. But I thought,
could we start by talking a bit about the area of this area of research? Because to my knowledge, it's still severely under-researched. Like when
yeah,
you talk about late 19th century, early 20th century bindings by women, it's basically just Guild of Women Bookbinders. Like,
yeah.
hardly,
Well, the
hardly
first person you
anyone
should
else.
always turn to is Marianne Tidcombe. Always. I don't know if you've had her on this, but she's an incredible scholar and very good at talking. So I would recommend you have her on it if you
Okay.
haven't already.
Pasha, write down the name.
Yeah,
I
Marianne Tidcombe. She wrote the book on women bookbinders, which is called Women Bookbinders, funnily enough.
from the mid 90s, you mean?
From the 19th century onwards, yeah.
Mhm.
And it's a very good book. Um, but really, other than that, there's really most of the research, and in fact, a lot of bookbinding bibliography is in catalogues of exhibitions, catalogues that dealers have written. That's where a lot of the information is. So it is quite hard to dig it out. There's one that was done in France not so long ago by Vrain, but even that's got inaccuracies in it because it's not they're never works of historical, they're not like Marianne, who is proper historian writing. So there's a lot more to be written and a lot more to do on it. A lot of the names are not known, or if they're initials, there were a lot of amateur bookbinders because it was deemed something that was nice for ladies to do. So a lot of them went off to the Dove's bindery and places and learnt. And similarly in France, a lot of them went to work for Pierre Legrand and work with him. He had massive binderies, so there was always room for them. But they actually did proper binding. They weren't just sewing. And so in the late 19th century, and early 20th century, it wasn't just in Britain that was happening. That was happening in France. Whether it was happening in Germany, I can only assume, probably yes. But I don't know enough about it. So it would be great to know more about that if anyone wants to enlighten me or tell me where to read about it. Were there women actually properly doing finishing and forwarding with Dorfner? I don't know. I've never heard of them. They've always been men. So there's an awful lot to find out. But yeah, so really, your best point of reference is to read Marianne Tidcombe's book, which is excellent. I mean,
Which
really,
which I did, but it was published in the 1990s, and I
yes,
can't find a single book of that caliber
yes.
published since then.
Oh yeah, no one that's taken it on. But then, maybe that's because it's deemed that it's not necessary anymore to write, because the bookbinders now are not anonymous. And it's the anonymity that I think intrigued her, the fact that you didn't really know much about these people. I mean, some of them you did, but others you didn't. So for instance here, okay, you've got this book, which is something I've just picked up. This is it going backwards? I can't really see. The historical
No,
sketchbook
it's
by
fine. Yeah.
Prideaux, and this is bound by her. I don't know why I've got a bit of that. Probably not meant to put that in there, but never mind. I've just got this. But you look at these kind of exquisite edges that she's done, which match the end. But she obviously wrote about bookbinding, and that included stuff on women bookbinders. But that was done at the time. This book was published in what, 1893. So it's always been there, and so she was perfectly accepted as a bookbinder, and taught lots of people. So it is everywhere. And Marianne definitely pulled the threads of all of that era together, which had never been done. So whether you need now to write a book about just women bookbinders, I don't think so necessarily.
And what about the market? Because I know art market is constantly rediscovering forgotten female artists.
Yes.
Is there a parallel movement in book market?
Of course. And a lot of that's institutionally driven, that they need representations of these people, or that now we know who these people were. They've got their initials on there. They weren't necessarily signed. Sometimes you couldn't tell it by the tools. And yeah, so there's definitely that going on, and collectors collect it. I mean, I don't know how much of that is investment. They're trying to keep ahead of the market, or but I have met collectors who are absolutely passionate about it because they love the fact that you are researching as you go along. And if you if you have a quantity of bookbindings by women bookbinders and you're not really sure who they are, they suddenly start to make sense. You can see particular skills, particular pattern. I mean, for instance, here, I believe this book is signed EJ, and it's got this really fascinating sort of queer, I suppose it's cut, really lovely book, and signed in the way that they all sign them if they'd been training at the Dubs Bindery, with the date, with their initials in the middle. You see it everywhere with a lot of amateur things down here. You can see the dates divided up and their initials in the middle, which is what Cobden Sanderson did. And this, I believe, is a New Zealand bookbinder, she's called Mary Eleanor Joachim, and it's an extraordinary thing. Now, if you had those again, if I'm right, I might be wrong. Marianne will be on the phone, and but if you had that, that's quite distinctive. How many times you've ever seen anything like that? I mean, that's really gouged in a way that the Guild of Women Bookbinders didn't do. And and it's early, it's 1905, so it's and so if you've got a quantity of those, you'd be like, well, must be her, or someone she trained with, or is that from New Zealand? You'd have all these questions answered, and so I think there's still a lot to find out, particularly that early era. I'm not sure, there's not much to find out about women bookbinders now. It's out there, and it's not necessarily distinctive. These are women who are working. It's harder for them often. They've got kids, and but I don't see, I can't see that there's a distinct thing anymore. But I think it's uncovering the research and finding these people, which we'll look at in a minute, because I've got a whole load of bindings by someone I can't really find much about, but she was clearly good. There is that thing where you suddenly realize they're not just an amateur bookbinder, they've gone beyond it. And so we could start having a look at this woman. This is Johanna Birkenruth, who famously, here's a pair of bookends by her, did a lot of so I'm not very good with this thing. It says, "Mind me as you find me." It's a sort of message about looking after people's book. Anyway, so it's kind of stud work and leather, and it's signed here, which you probably can't see very well.
It's stamped.
She was
blind tool.
Yeah. So she was an extraordinary woman. She was probably the first woman to have ever given formal lessons as a bookbinder. We can tell that because she advertised in the Studio magazine for bookbinding lessons, and she gave them in Cromwell Road. She produced a lot of kind of leather furniture, book furniture, revolving bookcase I've seen. I mean, all sorts of things. And she was a woman trying to make her way. She decided to earn her money out of it. And so these are probably about 1897, these things. I mean, they're kind of rough and ready in a way, but I think they're really, they're extraordinary. They're kind of a symbol of a woman working to keep her body and soul together. And bookbinding wasn't enough, so she had to make things. And, just as you might see now, people on Portobello Road taking their wares down there to try and sell them. And, doing anything she could to make a living. So she taught, so she made bookbinding, so she made leather goods. And she liked those kind of gouge techniques and the studs, and you see them all over the time. She made lace, boxes, all this kind of thing. So that's really fascinating. And and if she genuinely really was the first woman to give lessons, that's quite amazing in the 1890s, really. Making a living. And then you sort of look at other sort of great pioneers.
Before we continue,
Yeah.
I will interrupt you for a moment because I wanted to read a couple of comments. We have nothing, no questions yet. Maybe somebody will have some questions in the future.
Information.
And that's a good reminder for everyone to chip in. But we have our regular viewer Dave Turnbull. And he writes, greetings from the east coast of Scotland. Hi, Dave. Nice to have you here.
Hello.
The creation of books is truly a global phenomenon. That was about our discussion about South America, Asia, and everything else. But yeah, that's true. And there are so many interesting styles, and they all influence each other. So that's beautiful.
Yeah.
But sorry, and that's a reminder to all of our viewers. We've got some new viewers during the past few minutes. Please share your comments. Tell us from where you are watching us, and check the links in the description. There is some interesting stuff there. Sorry. So let's continue.
Yeah. Let's continue. So, talking about pioneers slightly later, this is a bit random because it's what's around my desk. So this is by a very famous and very valuable bookbinder called Rose Adler, who's French. She was sort of trained at the l'École du Cadre. It was for where women were allowed to go, basically. They couldn't go to the École Estienne, like other people. And then she went to work, like a lot of them, for Pierre Legrand, who had massive binderies. And she was really original. Even though she went to him, she was really original and really different. You see all sorts of things. I mean, this is a fairly simple one by her, but so clever. I mean, that gap there. I mean, it's just so thoughtful that she's made that kind of pattern, and your eye gets pulled along into it, and then it gets broken, and it's really stunning. And she had this sort of lovely color palette. I mean, having this kind of rose color here was really beautiful.
And like many of her works, it looks like a poster. I really like many of her bindings look
Very graphic,
like cinema posters from 20s or 30s, like bold, geometric, and even the text is of that
well,
era.
her big thing, of course, was that the boards, the whole thing is one thing. It's one design.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have front and back, and then you cobble it together, which is quite interesting because that whole front and back and having a braidle binding or whatever and nothing there is coming back again. I don't know whether that's laziness or what it is, but it's sort of like that whole. But her whole thing was that it should be. She really thought of it as a whole, and she wrote something. Actually, I've got a quote. She wrote something quite interesting, and it's all about how she really looked at the text, which was something that hadn't really happened before. People just made pretty bindings on things. They did their binding, and she wrote. In a 1931 catalogue, when she presented, 50 bindings, she wrote, "The situation of today's bookbinding, in the past, bookbinding was deaf, ignorant of what it contained. Like a herd, books often bore the mark of their master, and especially exalted with their beautiful coat of arms the great house to which they belonged. The modern bookbinder is truly modern in this. He is at the service of the text. He wants to hear it to make it heard. He embraces it. He exalts it. I mean, that's great, isn't it? You know, he's really, she was really thinking about what was inside all the time, and that's something that went on and on with designer bookbinders. I think that was reinforced by several people. Sally Lou Smith and the American bookbinder who worked in Britain. She was a great teacher of that, and so Adler taught a lot of people. She was very influential, and even in the 1930s, she's presenting a catalogue of bookbindings. So we think we think that women were completely derided, but that's clearly not true. I mean, to present a catalogue in 1931 under your name because you're so important was quite major, really. So that's her. And so we could sort of look at. I mean, maybe we should look at some other French binders, and very sort of precocious, kind of who I would call a book artist. Oh gosh, crash!
Okay.
A whole load of book bindings all crashing down. I'm going to look at Geneviève de Léotard, and I've got a very big book here. It's actually dark blue. It's not really showing that way, but so this is very typical of her. I mean, amazing. I don't know if you can see the actual sort of design.
Yeah. We can.
It's really beautiful, and the way these are properly embossed, really deep, and she's got this kind of smoothness of finish there.
Yeah.
And again, it sort of goes over. And again, she's a little bit after Adler, but she really knew her techniques, and it's very French, that perfect sort of finishing things that she did, and she taught a lot of people. She was again teaching women quite late on, and she was sort of a highly influential female bookbinder, and much commissioned. I mean, collectors didn't have care whether they were men or women. Who wouldn't want that on their book? I mean, it's on quite a serious book, to be honest. Is the Tableau de Paris, which has lots of plates in it by important illustrators.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks so luxurious. I can imagine a very Art Deco hotel.
Yeah,
yes,
totally.
yeah.
So this is kind of 20s, late 20s, early 30s. I think this is late 20s when she found this. So it had already.
And it also looks like jewelry of the time.
Yeah.
It looks really precious.
Yeah. I mean, you could wear that, if you sort of separated that bit, you could wear that on your neck. It would look quite good, wouldn't it? I mean, I'm not going to take it out, but so this is a very important book. So she was selected to bind this. It takes away from all that downtrodden women thing, which I don't particularly love. I mean, I think women were ignored a lot, but this is not ignoring. This is a heavy, important book with important illustrators and important writers in it, and very limited edition. There are only 25 copies like this. We're on Japon with extra sweets and very French. And she was the one who was chosen to bind it, and presumably paid quite properly by the collector. So, that's the 1920s, and it was all going on. And she wasn't wealthy, so it wasn't that she was picking this book and binding it for nobody. It was done on commission. So she was, great.
It is pretty amazing that the first and the last rows of the gold tooled dots are not complete. They are interrupted by the central part of tooling. It's such a minute detail, but it changes the perception of the whole.
It moves your eyes entirely, doesn't it? Yeah. I mean, she was she won a prize in 1927. Again, she worked with Legrand, like they all did, but went on her own in about 1925 or something, and then she became a teacher back at les écoles art décoratif, where she taught a lot of people, and so like all bookbinders, they all have to make their money in lots of different ways. She would take commissions, she taught, they all the same story goes on today. It's like musicians or photographers or whatever. They always make their money how they make their money. They just can't stop themselves. They're going to do that. And then this is the big query. So I had a lot of book bindings from one particular binder in this catalogue, and there's nothing about her. She's mentioned in one catalogue, but with no details, no idea who she was.
Also French or from different countries?
Also French. She was called Lucette Levy, possibly Jewish, who knows? And I just sort of a fellow bookseller. I found a lot of these and thought I might be able to do something with them. And of course, I've looked everywhere, but this woman, she could well have been taught by Geneviève de Léotard. She's sort of the right era. At the École des Arts Décoratifs, where they all went. She could well have worked with Pierre Legrand. There's one sort of clue in one book where the book is inscribed to her by the author, famous author. And so it sort of slightly gives a clue as to who she was, because I'm really, from it, I can just assume that she may have been connected to the family of Gaston Levy, who was a famous collector of bookbindings and publisher. And so this is inscribed very affectionately to her as Mrs. Henri Levy, which is the first time you have a clue to what her husband's name was. And the fact that a famous writer is writing to her, she's probably, well, if she's not directly related to the publishing firm, which had several brothers in it, she was a cousin or something, but she was in those literary circles. But her name is Lucette, and she was active in from these books. I've seen 3 other bindings by her, one in Christie's and 2 with other booksellers over the years, with no information, just none. But she was really good. I mean, this is one of her books. I mean, they're all in different styles, which is really interesting. So completely varied. She goes from very pictorial, this is on a novel about World War One planes, so it's all about the eagles in the sky. Well, there's nothing on the other side. That's quite French.
Pasha, I think.
But actually, when you look at it, you go, "Oh, just another pictorial binding." But then you look at it, and you've got this kind of thing going on. No amateur bookbinder attempts that kind of thing, do they? I mean, that's quite hard.
That's why I wanted to say that probably Inger Duvik, one of our previous guests, would have liked this binding. He's an amateur bookbinder from Norway, but he does some...
Well, amateur. Well, I'd say.
Oh, I see. Amateur, but he's brilliant.
Yeah, exactly. He isn't a professional bookbinder who earns his living by making books, but he makes amazing books.
Makes beautiful books.
Yeah.
Well,
and this is the one that caught my eye immediately. It could have been made last year.
Yeah.
It's so bold, it's so detailed, and the colors and the design really good. Really good.
Yeah. So that's sort of and again, she's reflecting what's in the book. So it's in the Adler Leotard sort of canon. So it's about a World War One crew of a reconnaissance plane where it's 2 eagles in the sky, isn't it? So fantastic. And she was really skilled. She could do, this work. And so even if she was a very posh woman, she certainly worked. And this is a sort of one of the earlier ones. Well, if you like Telegram bindings and things, you're going to love it. And but again, that's quite sweet because that goes right over with all this sort of blind tooling. And it's just very well done. Good lettering. Don't get very much good lettering these days, do you? But of its time, very much of its time, that lettering. And again, she does. She went somewhere to get good M papers, so all her M papers, amazing. A lot of use of metallic, which is so sort of that time again. So I'm going to show you a few of hers just to we've got a whole research paper in here. by someone who's going to find
Yeah,
out who it is.
she deserves a monograph. Somebody
Yeah.
should
Yeah.
find her.
Well, I mean, there must be something, you know, someone who's prepared to go to the Bibliothèque Nationale and just sit there and maybe go through the, you know, what would your spring points be? You go to the Gaston Levy archive that must be in there somewhere, you know, the publishers, and find out who Henri Levy was and who was she and blah, blah, blah. And but this is fantastic. This is so Art Deco, isn't it? It's fantastic.
Yeah, and
And you know,
the
inside,
spine is absolutely amazing as well.
yeah. Unfortunately, a little bit faded, but you can't have everything. But you know, using all that sort of Palladian and thing. But look at this. This is the end papers. Woo! It's
Wow.
like the inside of an ocean liner in the 1930s, isn't it? I mean, it's just
Yeah.
fantastic.
Oh, a dirigible.
Yeah. I mean, Greta Garbo in a dress coming down the staircase in a Hollywood movie or something. I mean, it's absolutely fantastic, and it's in a book that you know, has these of the era, lovely pochoir illustrations. But you know, that's good. I mean, to me, that's good. And I think that all these books came from the family, so you know, implies she was wealthy enough to keep them.
That's what I wanted to ask you. Did they all come to you
They came through another dealer who
but
deals a lot in France,
from one
and he bought them
collection?
all in one go. So,
Yeah.
so you know,
So they were clearly made and stayed in the family.
I think so.
Quite a hobby she had, I have
Quite
to
a hobby, quite good, and yeah, quite good at it. But she moved around. She moved her sort of styles around. I mean, here we got a sort of real Jansenist binding.
Okay.
You know, completely different. Suddenly you got strap work and this whole sort of restrain thing going on, and they were all done. I mean, this is on Madame Bovary, so maybe it needs no, you know, does it need any fanfare? What are you going to do? You know, have a sort of picture of a wanton bourgeois on the front? I don't know. But you know, that I'm not quite sure that really reflects the content, but you know, but that's again the 1920s. And then there's a really good one. Well, you know, that's as good.
Again, Art Deco.
Yeah, but I mean, that's as good as
Oh yeah.
any you see of that time, isn't it? I mean, Bonnet would have been quite happy with that, with his early Art Deco stuff. You know, it's really thoughtful. That's quite witty, isn't it, to have that bit there?
And whose confessions are those?
The Confessions de Minuit.
Midnight.
You're like really asking me what's inside the book. It's Georges Duhamel, and it, you know, it's and this is the one that gives the clue. This is the one that you need if you're going to start researching, because it's got this inscription.
Oh, okay.
To Madame Henri Levy, a friend to my books, and my friend. You know, homage Duhamel. You know, he was a proper author, and so you can assume that, you know, she must have been in these circles, and you know, so he must have been probably something to do with the publishing family. Quite hard to find. There's nothing. I mean, you just can't delve. It's just all a bit opaque, and I don't know whether that's because, you know, obviously they went in the war, and who knows, you know, only sort of by 1939, 40, they probably left France. So who knows? But you know, that's knockout. You know, I think that's a really great binding. So who was she? You know, this is a perfect example of a woman bookbinder who's been lost to the history of time. And you know, where? I mean, she must have shown somewhere. You feel that she must have been shown. And again, it's got this really brilliant inside. I mean, look at that.
Whoa.
And repeating that.
It spills inside. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, well, they're sort of incredible. I don't, you know, and I suppose there's all sorts of ways, you know, find who made the paper. Where was she getting this paper from? Paris, but you know,
Somebody must know who
Someone
made this
knows.
paper.
Yeah,
Someone knows
Yeah.
who she is, and they're hiding it.
Hopefully,
And then,
somebody will become inspired by our talk today, and
I'm really hoping. I'm
well,
just I'm gonna keep hammering away till
investigate.
someone sees it.
Yeah.
And then
I'll
there's
I'll read a
another
couple of
version of
I'll read
her.
a couple of more comments, and then I will return to you,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
Dave Turnbull continues to to keep our comment section alive. Nobody else is joining, and that's a pity, because there are people watching the stream, and hopefully they have questions, but they don't want to ask them for some reason. But anyway, so Dave wrote
Okay, friendly.
the purpose of a binding.
Maybe they're realizing I don't know anything.
The purpose of a binding is twofold: to protect the contents and to encourage the consumption of the contents. So, yeah.
Oh, they encourage the consumption. I like that. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, and he just
Like a
he
dust
just
jacket.
mentioned that the bindings are quite lovely, that you showed a bit earlier. So
Yeah.
if anybody else has any questions or comments, we'd be happy to see them in the comment section.
Definitely. Definitely.
But yeah, anyway, Sophie.
So this is another one of her. You see, she kept moving styles. Maybe this was her problem, that she never developed a style. Because here it's really textured, and inside there's all these illustrations. She's basically taken one of the illustrations.
Is it also
don't know if you can-
onlays, or is it sewn?
It's onlays. I mean, it's insane. It's sort of an inlay panel, but it's onlay. It's full of onlays, and it's really textured. And then you've got calf and Morocco, and I mean, I don't know if you can see there, but it's probably
And it looks
brilliant.
nothing like her other works, I
No.
have to say.
Nothing.
And the illustration itself, is it just me, or does it look a bit like Beatrice Potter's?
Well, that's the inside, so that's what she's copying. You see, that's
Uh-huh.
not the illustration, but
But the style. So
styles. So she's just taken it and copied it, but it's so hard. I mean, when you look at it, it's so textured and it's all blind tooled, and then you've got all these using all these different leathers to create the textures. And
it doesn't look like something you do for yourself.
no,
Perhaps it was a gift to her husband or to her
maybe,
kids, or
maybe.
it looks very personal.
But I mean, it's hours of work. It's insane. So so she did that, and then and then I'll show you one final one of hers, or we'll all go mad. But this is her again, on a very sort of important futurist book. And it's basically saying, this is what's going to happen in 1992. It's a very famous kind of early sci-fi book. But look at that tooling. I mean, that's completely different and brilliant. And so she's got a totally different style. Again, we've got these kind of fantastic end papers. There's her signature down the bottom. You can't really see, but she signed them. Again, that's weird in itself, for someone who's not known. How can they, where have they all been? So that's sort of amazing, really. And then one last tiny one, completely different again.
Oh, it is
Cute
so
as a button.
small. Yeah, you can't really understand
But
that
she's,
from the photos,
that's a
but-
sort of 19th century look. She's gone for very simple, but then it's cute on the inside.
Yeah.
Cute as a button. So yes, all I'm doing is producing questions, but there's the question: who was she? And that is a classic, I would say, woman bookbinder that no one knows anything about, and that's really what Marianne was trying to address when she wrote about women bookbinders.
Yeah, I'm looking at all these books by her, and they will probably appeal to very different.
Lists for book fairs, because I do a lot. I do about one a month, really, from about November to June. I kind of do one catalogue a month, but that's all fair lists. So those are up on my website. People can look at those. But yeah, so I do probably one printed catalogue a year when I've saved things for them and then put them out, so they've not been seen.
Don't get me wrong, but I still don't understand. We've talked to a number of booksellers and a few people who also make catalogs, but why do you publish catalogs? Like,
People like
why?
them. ego. No, people really like them, and of course, I think some of it was that's how I grew up. That was the only way of doing it. You couldn't send out an e-list, and an e-list are very, a lot of my customers are older, and they don't read them. They're not going to sit there and read something online ever.
And also you probably get tens, if not hundreds, of letters a day, and it does not compare to getting an actual printed catalog. Do you
No,
send
no.
it to your selected clientele, or
I'll usually print about 500 of them. So, booksellers don't have that. Oh no, I mean, quite a few buyers, and some very, who are bigger than others. Not bigger, but who buy a lot more than others, or very, very simpatico with what you're doing. That they totally collect in your field. And others who dip in and out. They might buy one book a year or whatever. Still love them. My favorites are the ones who got no money, who who just pay you in bits for things, but they love those books so much, and it's great. I love that. But I've got a printed catalogue I'll send quite widely to people, and including people who would never buy anything. Why not? And I just like doing it every so often, and it's nice to have that discipline that you're not constantly churning all the time, because otherwise you go book fair, so you're always sorry, I'll just switch off my email. You always keep peddling to keep up with yourself, because you've got to buy stuff and catalog it and photograph it and then get it out, and so I do nice lists for book fairs. I have a wonderful designer called James Alexander who designs my catalogs for me, and he's amazing. He does everything at really short notice, because I'm like, I'm going in 2 days, but then there'll be a proper list for the fair, so they're like a catalog, and I'll print some of those, and then for customers who really don't read an e-list, I'll send them one, a printed one. It won't be very high stock paper or whatever, but at least they get a printed fair list. But yeah, these are every year I'll do one big catalogue that is actually a curated, I hate that word, I'm not a curator, I'm a seller, but a curated selection. So this is on women makers, so it's not just about binders, it's about people who carve stone and people who design plates, and it's on all sorts of things that women do, and I think it's quite interesting. I think it's interesting. We'll find out.
Both an intellectual exercise and the labor of love.
Or you just go into it a bit deeper than you might have done. I mean, I don't believe in over describing anything either, because I think, in fact, Brian Mag said to me when I was young, he said, don't give everyone everything. Leave something for the collector to do, because they don't want it all just presented to them. They're not buying in my case, they're not buying an investment. It's not like buying a modern first, so they want to, I'm hoping someone will go, I want to do the research into Lucette Levy and find out who she is. That's what I want, and then they can feed it back to me. I mean, they always know more than I do. The people who are absolutely passionate collectors will know that certain people had toast for breakfast every morning or whatever, and I don't know that, and it's rather wonderful to find those people. So yeah, one catalogue a year probably printed, and then the rest comes every month. There'll be some book fair list.
Stepan, any news?
Well, we are back on YouTube for a few minutes already, and we were back on Facebook.
Well, I hope they've enjoyed that.
A bit later, but yeah, I don't know what happened. Sorry.
Right.
I'd like to say sorry to our viewers as well, because I'm not sure what happened. Everything just froze on my side and stopped working. So, but we're back, and should we return to the last book you were talking about, or should we
Okay.
just
No, I don't
continue?
think so. It'll be
Yeah.
fun.
Let's talk about the Elizabeth the second coronation book.
Oh
Who
yeah.
does?
Okay.
Yeah,
So this
yeah,
is
yeah.
Elizabeth
It's a
Greenhill.
fun one.
This is a fun one. This is Elizabeth Greenhill, who's probably best known for her sort of her clouds going across. I don't know if you've ever seen any of her work. It's quite well known. There was a book written about Elizabeth Greenhill's work, so it's quite easy to find it. And the book says that it's a full catalogue raisonné. However, this book is not in it. And it is definitely her. It's signed by her, I believe, on the back, Elizabeth Greenhill.
Mhm.
And she had a fascinating life. You know, she lived in a hotel. She was from a very wealthy family. But she went to France to learn how to bind. And she went and studied with Pierre Legrand, as Adler had, and several others. And so she's like the crossover of the two styles, you know. And you know, how good is that? There's this woman probably fresh back from France, binding the coronation, you know, just the text of the coronation of the Queen. And you know, so that's 1953, and she must have bound it about that time, but it's just an unrecorded binding by her, which is.
And how upper class was she? Did she attend the actual event?
Did she work? No, I don't think she was that. I mean, she was wealthy. I think they were hotel owners. I think she was wealthy. Well, yes, she might have done, but no, I don't. I don't think so.
So posh, but not.
Very well, she might have done, but you know, you tend not to. It would have been. She would have been young, so it's probably unlikely because it might have been her father may have gone or whatever, but you know, not her. But anyway, it's just a very nice to have a book binding by someone where you think you know everything that they've done, and it's not really like her other stuff. So it's
It looks nothing like her other
yeah.
stuff.
I mean, it's very early. You know, if it's in the 50s, it's really early, and all the other stuff is like 70s, 80s. You know, I mean, when I first started in the book world, she was binding, and you know, you could definitely recognize her work at a drop. You know, very easy to recognize. So that's really lovely. It's a really nice thing. And then looking further on, oh my God, here's another mystery. Here we go. This is possibly an American binder. Who knows? Very definitely signed this book by someone called Catherine Gregory. And this is on a Eugene O'Neill book, so even more American. Kind of crazy book binding. I mean, that's paper. But it says on it, this binding is designed by Catherine Gregory. It's got a little note up there, and is one of an edition of 12. And I can't find any record of any of it in OCA, you know, any of the sort of library records anywhere. And it's kind of cool. I kind of like it. And so who she was, I mean, there was a Catherine Gregory who was an artistic wife of a famous sculptor, and it might well be her, but who knows, really? You can't really tell. But, you know, even nicer, it's got a sort of women's book plate in it, a woman who was quite well known. So another mystery to be solved. Where are the other ones of the 12? And who was Catherine Gregory? I mean, did she just design bindings, or was this her only binding? Did she do other things? So any librarians, please be in contact. I like these mysteries. It's really good. And it's kind of cool not solving it in a way. And then going back to Americans, but this one living in Britain, a very important woman, as you probably know. I keep dropping all my descriptions out of my books. This is Sally Lou Smith, who became very important because she taught everybody. And she was also very much one of those, you know, that she thought about the whole book. She often got the colours of the inside of the book that reflected the, you know, in reflecting in there. But I mean, how cool is that? If you look at that, it's fabulous. Really, really great book, actually. And that's Pigskin. I mean, it's properly difficult. I think, you can tell me, but Pigskin's quite hard to bind with, isn't it? Very
Yeah.
unpredictable.
It may be hard. I think I had usually more trouble with sheepskin because it's so soft and
Yeah, it just
but
flakes in your hand.
yeah.
But it's, you would think it's not that malleable, pigskin.
Yeah.
And of course, if it marks, and that's it, really. Nothing you can do about it. You know? But then that's, lovely Morocco on the inside. I mean, it's a, book about Cobden and Sanderson, which is sort of, I kind of like the fact there's two great bookbinders combined together. And so, she's a key figure again, great woman binder who taught loads of men and women binders, and everybody talks about Lou and how wonderful she was, and how nice to have something representing her, and the fact that it's on lectures by Cobden Sanderson is brilliant. Let's see what else I got, really. All sorts of books littered around here, and really, after this I sort of go a bit, those are the dead ones. And then, there's Madeleine Gras here, another famous French, not very typical, but just sweet, on a really good book. So that's just a nice, very French binding again, but it's on the Mayo, Daphnis and Chloe, which has got these beautiful paper, and B, these lovely little wood cuts in it. I seem to be just hitting the goats. Quite naughty. But one of the great books, this, really, sort of very much part of that whole era. This is published by Gunnar, but he originally did these engravings for Kessler at the Cranach Press in between the wars, but it wasn't, that was in the 20s, and then it was published in 1937. But it's a lovely book, nice sort of reverse calf, yummy, delicious hem paper, and then just this very beautiful and simple binding by Madeleine Gras, who's
I like how she used these gouges on the spine. It's just such a small detail, but still, it's,
I know, isn't that really lovely?
It's amazing, yeah.
And not being tempted just to fill it.
Yeah, exactly.
The less is more thing is very appealing, isn't it? And people can overdo it a lot. And then really the whole thing, I mean, obviously you're always limited by what you've got at any given time, but the whole thing sort of then moves to people who are alive, and therefore more accessible. And you can sort of think about that. And I'll just move all this stuff around. Oh dear, it's all got a bit much. And obviously, being British, a lot of them are British. So I'll show you a few of those, and then a new French binder I found who I really like the work of, and I'll just talk to you about her towards the end. But in Britain, okay, so I grew up with all these names all around me in the book trade, and so I've got examples by some great binders, and I'm now looking if I put them all. So I suppose the first I'm going to show you is before I was showing you this one. This is a recent licentiate of the designer bookbinders, but I showed this book quite a while ago when I was in Portobello Road, and this is by Miranda Kemp, who's rather wonderful. She's actually an artist who became a bookbinder, but she's still an artist, obviously. And so her work's very good and very artistic. If you look at how she's done all these lines, so this is a book about building a garden. You can see that sort of whole.
I think I like the back cover even more than the front cover.
Yeah. So the point of these lines is very interesting. So this is on a book by Claire Leighton, who is one of Britain's greatest wood engravers, and who also features in the catalogue. And you can see, as we pointed out before, behind me, there's sort of process proofs of one of her wood engravings here. And so Miranda, who's a wonderful artist herself, became very interested in the cross hatching that you need to have in wood engraving to create the texture. So, you can see that there's that inspiration of both of nature with the sort of leaves and the grass feeling of that, and the cross hatching, which is wonderful. And then she's worked on the inside, and
this is what she's best known for, probably. Her yes,
beautiful. I mean, that's just beautiful, and
the
totally bringing the whole book together.
The quality and the color.
And this is her really young. This is, I mean, as a young, not really young necessarily, but a novice bookbinder. Novice, I say. I mean, really? And I think it's the most fantastic book. And, it's all on this, look at that on the edges that she's done. I mean, everything is thought out and beautiful. And so this is a book about Claire Leighton, who was quite a radical. She was an incredible woman. She went to live with her partner, who was a guy who was a Guardian journalist. And, it was radical in the 30s to go and live with someone. And they built a house together. They didn't get married. She then got bored of the whole thing and left and went to America. Cool. And Miranda's cool too. And Miranda famously sort of hates her work after she's done it, which is ridiculous because this is just absolutely fantastic. And, so she definitely deserves a place in this catalogue. It's really, she's marvellous. And, no doubt she'll be a fellow of the Designer Bookbinders before long. But I think that's a really great book, and I really love the referencing of the wood engravings. And then we've got Kate Holland, who appears quite a lot in these things. It's quite funny, but this is a book about a red deer. It's kind of like one of those anthropomorphic books that are like Tarka the Otter or something like that. And this is rather sweet because it's on a Gregunod Press book, which is really sweet. Excuse me, and beautifully printed. And she's basically created a wood and the little deer tail showing in the so quite witty. Just a very nice, really lovely piece of leather for a start. You get those colours are really lovely, and I love all the kind of the chunky lines, and it makes you, it would have been so tempting to go like that, but she's really pulled that around a bit. And one of her most successful books.
We are big fans of Kate's work.
Yeah. And I mean, it all very, it moves around so much. She's always thinking. That's great. And then we've got Eri Winazaki, who works at Shepherd's Bookbinders, and she does these incredible sort of artist books with Danny Flynn, who also is there. And this is she does sort of editions of 5. We're always talking about how hard it is to sell artist books in England. People don't like, but these are her illustrations as well. And she's done all this kind of. I think I'm holding it upside down. She'll forgive me. I mean, they're sort of okay. So you got a crane basically, and this is sort of like gasworks and things like that. And then Danny writes these books. She prints them, or maybe he prints them, and then she does all the illustrations. And that's just like all of her work. It's exquisite, just à point. She's a really great bookbinder. And so
I don't know much about her. She
works at Shepherd's.
Mm-hmm.
She does a lot of designer binding. It's always beautiful. It's always immaculate. She's really thoughtful, and she does these artist books, and they genuinely do them as well as other book bindings. But they genuinely do them out of love because they're impossible. They're so hard to sell, these things. And I mean, I bang the drum for her. She's absolutely brilliant bookbinder, very artistic, very thoughtful. The fact that she does all the illustrations as well as the binding in these books, but also her other bindings are really stunning. I mean, you can look up her work and see it on the Designer Bookbinders website and things like that. And she's really excellent, and totally thoroughly nice person as well. Really, really self-effacing, really incredible. Really great bookbinder. So I've got a couple of her artist bindings in there, and then there's this book, which is Hannah Brown, with a sort of very
recognizably
very
so.
recognizable, very classic. Her mixing the embroidery with her leather work. I mean, that sort of onlay dots, and obviously it's the world. And there's a guitar going on in there, and these are actually guitar kind of, that kind of thick guitar string look, even with the clasp, which feels as though it's something of it. And this was a book that was sort of like a competition binding. It was printed in Estonia, and it's called The World Was Sung. And so you see a lot of, I'm going the wrong way. It's amazing. I can drive a car, really, isn't it? And so you see all sorts of bindings of this book, but this is really inventive, and the fact this is all embroidered, and it's just lovely. They're nice, but these are cities, I guess, on these dots, and it's just beautiful. Really nice thing. So it's good to have her represented. She, you see her work around a lot. She's another woman who brings up 2 children and works very hard, and it's impressive. She still pedals away at that. And then what else have I got? I've got some by Hein Song, who you probably know.
Yep.
Much collected. A couple of her books. This is her book of the Camus, The Myth of Sisyphus. And it's quite just very typical Bradel binding, nothing going on the spine, but very typical of her work, very spare and thoughtful, and just very beautifully done. Quite interesting. She's kept the flaws in the leather, which I quite, people go, why is that like?
Mm-hmm.
I like the fact it's organic. It's really nice. And then, I mean, these are again quite early bindings by her. And then this is her binding on the Jungle Book, which is quite nice. Again, this is reverse half here, so it's very patterned, and then it reflects on the.
Wow.
Oh wow.
That's really good, isn't it?
That's dramatic.
That's dramatic. Really good. So that's a really nice book, and lovely colours. She's got it right. And then this is her own little artist book that she's got, which she printed 9 of, and they're all in different colour, different materials. So she did it in sort of reverse calf. She did it in Morocco, and then she did it in this cloth, but with a Morocco binding. And that's just her little use of printer's flowers and making a little book out of printer's flowers. So it was sort of her first sort of, I think, maybe she'll tell me I'm wrong, it was her first, beginnings in artist books, which she now does. Although I don't know if you know her work, but she does them all the time now, and they're fantastic. So this is a very early book of hers. So that's very sweet. I'm running out of things now. And then I think I'll come to this young French binder that I've become quite fascinated by. She's called Hélène Limousin, and she works out of France. She exhibits at the Paris Book Fair, where I found her work for the first time, and probably about 3 years ago, I think it was just after the first fair they did after COVID, I found her work.
I think that's exactly where I saw her work as well.
Yeah. And it's changed, and I keep buying more and more and more. She must see me coming down the aisles and things. But they're articulated bone, so they move. And whoops, she dropping it. And she does this kind of work on the bone, which is really, I think it's really beautiful. and then it's got a very nice little back. And then this book's quite interesting because it's inscribed by the person who did the book to a very famous woman bookbinder, Claude, I think it's On les Lettres. So that's all rather gorgeous. I mean, it's the whole thing so it's a sort of unique copy of this book, in these sort of this articulated. I mean, it's just so nice. It's so flexible. But of course, what it means is you've got these little. She always has these little artist books, but you can open it right out, and there's no worries about what it's doing. And then when you've got a sort of artist book that's like that, you need to be able to open it. But beyond that, it feels amazing. It's sort of always slightly cold to the touch, and it's such a sort of unusual thing. But she really works. I don't know if you can really see, but she really works the bone and does this, does these patterns on it. And I think they're absolutely brilliant books. And she's every year she's developed something a bit more and a bit more and a bit more. And then I've got a sort of crazy little miniature one.
Okay.
And this is really sweet because it's about rain. The little text is about rain, and there, if you look on the thing, you've got this sort of earth and the sky and the rain. You can see it even clearer on there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just so adorable. She's even, done little things on the spine. I just think she's a really interesting binder, and I've not seen anyone doing this. And well, I mean, little things. I'm not really that into miniature books, I will say. I like that one, but I mean, I've never seen anyone doing that. And then, if you don't mind me just getting up, I'm going to get you one other thing she did just to show you.
Of course.
I'll just over here. And this is one I bought from her more recently. But she's just moving and moving and moving this thing, and then this kind of stands up. This kind of bends right over, and you can kind of make it into a stand. I mean, I can't show you really because I haven't got a base, but it bends completely almost. And,
okay.
And you can anyway. I'll show you if I could, but again, she's done these amazing colours, and she responds to the book and whatever. Love it. I think she's great. So she's kind of a new kid on the block. Maximum of 30 or something, and she's working away there and developing her own thing and being brave and going to book fairs on her own or with her husband and selling her stuff, which is it is quite brave. And I admire that, and also just the she does enough every year to go back again, and she's just working for herself doing it, and it really is impressive. I quite admire it. And then one book that I think Pavel was very interested in, which is this Teeny Miura. Well, this is from an edition, so she did a lot of them. Well, she designed them. She didn't actually put her hands on all of them. But this is a rather extraordinary little book, which is like a conglomeration of people. It's called You Can Judge a Book by Its Cover, which is something we all appreciate. And the Brief Survey of Materials by Bernard Middleton, the great bookbinder. And then it's beautifully printed, and it's got John DePaul, who is a famous, he's a wood engraver in America and much loved. And then it's bound by Kirsten Teeny Miura, with end papers by her partner, Eileen Miura. So the whole thing is a real sort of artist book with a focus on bookbinding. And so they designed this, she designed this, and then it was done in like 500 copies. So it's really cute. Really nice little reflection of the book arts world at that time. So that's 1990s basically, and you can kind of tell that from the design and everything. But that's really sweet, really eye-popping, and why not bind fairly big edition things in really nice bindings. It's really lovely. It's great. And I think I'm really out of books now, but I do have one. I mean, if you've got any questions.
But then very timely, because we're coming closer to our 90 minutes standard format, and even our technical issues fit perfectly into this timeline. So everything for the bad, for the good. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, it was great, presentation and range of books and diversity of not all eras, but
not all eras,
like
no, but
150 years. It's quite a lot.
150, yeah, a lot. It's a lot.
Has
happened.
Changed. A lot have happened. Yeah,
a lot has changed and a lot hasn't changed. It's very interesting, is and also that that it's become much more individual. People aren't. If you look at the early ones, everyone went to Legrand, or went to these schools. But now people are going all over the place to learn, aren't they? And there aren't the schools teaching like that anymore. So they go and train with one bookbinder or the other. But you can see that it. There was an era where the Dove's Bindery was training everyone, and then Legrand in France was training everyone, and there's definite themes. But yeah, now you've got people like Ellen who did go to the École SDM, but she's now just doing her own thing, and not really part of you don't see bookbindings like hers, so it's not as if the teachers were teaching that.
Yeah.
But you've seen things. I mean, you see the trends that are going on.
Well, we try, but so much stuff is happening.
One last question. You look at so many exquisite bindings, and I can see that you especially like French binding. Do you at least you talk a lot about it passionately?
Yeah.
So I assume you like it. Do you think there's still such a thing as a national school of binding? Do you think you can still recognize French binding from afar?
It's technically better. I mean, particularly in that early era, maybe not now so much, but there's a real thing of, well, it was a thing originally that you didn't do it yourself. And I think that, we in Britain, we were very in the arts and crafts thing. So you did it, that would never have appeared in France. I mean, they'd have a heart attack. That whole guild of women binders thing, that just never would have happened in France. That whole you do it all yourself. So you've always got those finishers and the forwarders, and you just get the Bonnet designing his bindings. And if you ever seen any of those designs, they're like color, one of those coloring books, but so detailed. Absolutely delineated what leather to use and what colors to use everywhere. We've all got numbers all over them. The most extraordinary things you can ever see are those designs, and I think that just didn't happen here like that. It just didn't. Okay, Sangorski and whatever, they had produced some amazing things,
and they still do.
Yeah, but that per one binder, not doing it themselves, but designing it absolutely, totally themselves. And so I suppose their output's bigger, they're more noticeable. I mean, no one could do thousands of bindings the way Bonnet did, so. And I guess there's still that inclination towards different materials now so there was always some of the more inventive stuff was happening here, and presumably in some of the Czech bindings that I've seen, early Czech bindings I see, which I'm fascinated by, which don't really get a press because their materials weren't very good. So they're beautiful. These 1920s, 1930s, even earlier.
The futurist bindings, yeah.
Yeah, I mean they're incredible, but they've got this sort of lumpen Morocco or leather that's not very good. and it does add to it. But you can see if that was done in sort of like French materials, people would be fighting for them, and it is that sort of those kind of design, that graphic look that was going on in Eastern Europe was just extraordinary. And then we had us doing everything ourselves, which creates some great artists. But it's sort of it's very different. It is very different. I can't say I prefer one to the other. But if you want finish, that's got to be France, really. And but inventiveness, no, not so much. Especially having just shown you Lucette, who I happen to like and think she's quite inventive. But it's just not. Yeah, it's not that sort of. Yeah, not as inventive, I think, in some ways. In some ways, there's a lot of doing what the collectors wanted. I mean, they're just bibliophiles in France, passionate book collectors in France that you don't particularly get elsewhere, who would commission binders, and it's a very, very big thing, which isn't so much now. Here, maybe, yeah.
Well, we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, see where it goes. It's all going to change again.
Yeah. Many times.
Many times.
But
well, thank you.
Anyway, it was great talking to you. Thanks a lot for joining us today and showing all these books and telling.
Thank you for having me. It's been a joy.
Yeah. I hope we'll have an opportunity to talk to you in the future once again when you create another catalog or something like that.
Definitely. That would be great. But lovely to meet you both properly. Well, I've met Stefan before, but Pamela, I haven't met you.
Yeah.
Lovely to meet you, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about international bookbinding and the iBookBinding International Book Prize.
We'll work on that. So thanks to everyone who was watching us today or who is watching this video in the future. We'll stay here as usual for a bit longer while the stream drops on both platforms. It takes something like 30 seconds to a minute, and but still I invite all of you to check the links in the descriptions. There are a couple of links that lead to Sophie's Instagram website, and please check it and maybe subscribe.
The catalog will be up there in about 2 or 3 weeks. So.
Yeah.
And you can always ask me for one if you want one sent to you. If you really are going to go down the finding out who Lucette Levy was line.
Yes, it will. If you are interested into researching this part, also contact us because we'd be interested in talking to you about this story. So maybe somebody really decides to do that. Please check also the link to our Patreon account because money we get from our patrons allow us to do some research work, some editing if it is needed. Like it may be needed with today's video because we'll have to cut it and re-upload it with bits and pieces that were missed by some of the viewers. But anyway, I jinxed us today because I told everything was going fine. But
well, there you go.
Yeah.
Always
anyway, it's fine.
Like bookbinding.
Anyway, yeah. So thanks to everyone for being with us today. Next week we don't have a live stream. At least we don't have it scheduled yet. In 2 weeks, we will have Mark Cockrum and we'll discuss his book binding. And we hope to get other bookbinders who were working on this year's 6 book bindings to talk about their work, as we usually do. So we're really looking towards this talk with Mark and hopefully some other talks as well. So stay tuned.